DeFi is growing pains with Yaniv Tal from The Graph, Demian Brenner, who I've known for a long time from Open Zeppelin, Taylor Monahan from MyCrypto, and Sinju Tuang from Dystopia Labs, who ran one of the best DeFi conferences, virtual DeFi conferences just a couple of months ago herself. So it should be a good discussion. We're going to talk about how to build a safer DeFi. Sinju, take it away.
Awesome. Hey, everyone. So we're really excited to have all you here. Name is Shinju. I'll be moderating the panel here today on building a safer DeFi. And we have Taylor, CEO of MyCrypto, Yaniv, project lead at Graph Protocol, and Demian, CEO of Open Zeppelin. So for the purposes of this panel, so we're structuring it, we're going to start by talking about risk in different stages of the DeFi lifecycle, and then we'll talk about what the industry needs to do holistically to succeed. So to start, can you guys give a quick intro on your project, what it does, when did you guys launch, and where in the stack does it sit? And also, who are your main users and how are they using it?
Sure, I can go first. Hi, I'm Yaniv. I'm the project lead at The Graph. We're an indexing and query protocol for blockchain projects on Ethereum and IPFS right now. We have a lot of the top DeFi projects building on The Graph, projects like Uniswap, Synthetics, Aave, Balancer, Melonport, and a bunch of others. And we help projects index data and build APIs that they can use to efficiently load data from their applications. So projects build these subgraphs that allow them to define how to ingest, process, index, and serve data in a verifiable way.
Awesome. I'm Taylor Monahan. I'm the founder and CEO of MyCrypto. MyCrypto is most commonly known as a wallet. But what that means is that it allows you to access your Ether and your tokens and basically do anything that you may want to interact with the blockchain. We mainly focus on Ethereum, but we do support any of the EVM-based networks like Ethereum Classic and the testnets and all of that. We are currently working on kind of overhauling our product. So if you go to beta.mycrypto.com, you can see some of the upgrades we've done. We have like multi-account support. It's really a different experience. It's super exciting. And you know, our main users, they're a whole spread of users, but they're individuals, retail people who want to do something. Some of them are more DeFi focused. Some of them are like hardcore paper wallet, cold storage type people. And we started doing this like right basically when Ethereum launched. And there's really only the command line that you could, you know, access and create a new wallet and send your funds around and stuff like that. And it has been a wild ride to get to where we are today. And I've learned so much about just literally everything. And I think that, you know, obviously we're going to talk about safety and security today, and hopefully I can contribute somewhat to that conversation.
Good. Hi, everyone. My name is Demian Brenner. I'm founder and CEO of Open Zeppelin. Open Zeppelin is a leading cybersecurity company focused on blockchain technology. So we work with many of the big names in the industry, making sure that their decentralized systems work as intended. For example, this year we've worked with Compound, Celo, UMA, DYDX, Ogre, many projects in the DeFi space. We also found vulnerabilities in Facebook's Libra compiler, found a vulnerability in Maker's governance system in our work together with Coinbase. And besides the security audits, we also created the most popular library for smart contract development, used widely in the space. So it has over 1.5 million downloads, over 200 contributors in GitHub, and actually over 12% of all Solidity files in GitHub are from Open Zeppelin. So I think we are a big part of the whole decentralized tech stack.
Awesome, that's great. So to start, can you guys share some of your experiences from the early days of your projects, or talk about a project that you really admire and what aspects of security that you guys really cared about? And looking back, like, do you think that was the right focus? And if or right processes that you implemented, or if there's something you would have done differently.
Yeah, in our case, we've been in the space for over 5-6 years. So I remember the DAO hack happening in 2016. I would say, wow, this is amazing. This is going to change everything. But security is a big concern, right? You don't want people to hack smart contracts and steal $60 million worth of Ether. So we realized that people wanted to build these systems, but they didn't have the tools to do it in a safe and reliable way. That's why we created the OpenZeppelin contract library, especially with security as a focus. What we did there is, first we did open source and reusable. So all the code that everyone is using can be audited by anyone in the community, and also we're basically reusing the same components. So you create similarities and you create network effects around the code that everyone is using. Also, we build the libraries on a solid foundation of community vetted code. So it's not only us as a team, which of course is limited, that's reviewing the code and making sure that's always up to date based on all the new discoveries in terms of security best practices, but we have a huge community of people introducing PR, pull requests, issues, and helping us improve it. And finally, we've conducted several security audits for different versions. Of course, internally, given that we're a security firm, but also external firms to make the process more serious.
Cool. So for us, we knew that we wanted to build the graph as a decentralized protocol from the very beginning. But we took this approach that we've seen become more common now of progressive decentralization. So in our first version, we open sourced our graph node, which is the core software that does the data processing that's written in Rust. And teams started building on that pretty early on. And then we launched our hosted service, which has been in production now for about 1.5 years. And has been getting a lot of usage. And the next step for us is launching our decentralized network. So far, we ourselves haven't launched our smart contracts yet that actually handle funds ourselves. We do have a bunch of security and requirements on our software to make sure that any project that uses the graph can depend on it. But as far as us building a secure kind of resilient system that can function in a decentralized setting, we've really taken our time with that piece, because we've recognized that it's really important, if you're accepting customer funds, that that all of that is handled with really strong economics and game theoretic security, as well as obviously code quality and all of that. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing that we've seen with projects that do the kind of progressive decentralization thing, which I think it's different if you're just building smart contracts versus like an actual network of nodes that are providing some kind of service, like is the case for us. But probably some interesting learnings there.
Yeah, that's excellent point. Yeah, so I am maybe a little bit less technical than people who are like building entirely new networks and securing them. And so I think that a lot of my experience with security and my knowledge around this, specifically like crypto and security, comes from the fact that I know enough to be very scared, but I don't know enough to really truly do anything about it. And so like I obsessively consume all of the things that could possibly go wrong. And over time, it's like the DAO, I think, is such a great example of this thing that was so exciting. There was like a little bit of talk that was, hey guys, maybe this thing could go terribly wrong. But for the most part, it was really, really, really a bullish atmosphere. And then for it all to just like collapse in hours, days, whatever it was. And then the fallout to then last month, that just upped my anxiety, even more. And so for us personally, we've dealt with like, I mean, the biggest things we've dealt with are like the fact that the internet itself is not really secure. There have been like the BGP hijacks, which is literally like rerouting the internet traffic in order to steal people's crypto funds from a decentralized website, or not decentralized website, but like it's not a custodial, service. That was absolutely fascinating to me. It just shows the lengths that people will go to get any crypto that they possibly can. I think the thing that like consumed me the most though was talking to one-on-one with people who were the victim of scams or phishing or like forgetting to back up their key or backing it up and then losing it, or like any of these things. And, because I was answering support tickets for so long, it was really painful to hear people basically going into the space thinking that nothing could possibly go wrong, and then one little mistake and they've lost everything. And so smart contracts terrify me. I think that we will get there at some point. But I think that just the number of attack vectors and the lengths people are willing to go to get their hands on crypto is a very dangerous, very, very, very dangerous combination, especially this early in the industry.
Yeah, I completely agree. So pertaining to DeFi projects specifically, what are some risks tied to DeFi that aren't as much of a priority for normal dApp developers?
All of the things. So when we talk about like how many different attack vectors there are so many. So for my product, when we initially like set out, I was like, well, if we don't exit scam with people's funds, then nothing could go wrong. And that was really, really, really wrong. That was very naive. So you have, I kind of look at it like this. You have the external bad actors, you have internal bad actors like bad apples. You have like a malicious team, like a scammer, or someone that's going to exit scam. And then you have people with the best of intentions who make a mistake and then everything collapses. And the DAO, I think, is a perfect example of this again. And I think a lot of the DeFi things that we've seen recently are a good example of this. People are excited. People are, they're not waking up in the morning and saying, hey, I'm going to build an insecure product and then serve it to people. Let's see what happens. Like they really want to build something valuable and they really don't expect anything bad to happen. The reality is that there are so many ways that things can go wrong that you have to be so hyper diligent. And I'll let the guys dive into exactly what that, the hyper diligence requires.
Yeah, I think we can divide this in two different levels, at the protocol level and also at the kind of like systemic level. In particular with protocols, in the end, these are protocols that, where code powers real money. So any potential vulnerability there could be exploited and funds can be stolen, which we've seen happen, unfortunately. And also all these protocols are creating new systems and new game dynamics. And in the end, it's a mesh of incentives. So these systems are yet to be proven. Given all the complexity and all the stakeholders that protocols have, there could be certain situations or certain scenarios where some behavior could be exploited that wasn't foreseen. So again, when you design systems for the first time, and I think we're innovating at many levels at the same time here, I think no risks exist, which I think is a good thing because it means that we are moving forward and we are experimenting. And then at the systemic risk level, in the end, DeFi is a network of smart contracts interacting with each other 24/7. So not only projects need to see how their smart contracts within the protocol interact with each other, but also how their systems interact with other live systems and how the collective incentives work together to assess whether that poses a threat. If something happens in Maker, how does it affect what's happening in Compound? market manipulations happening through flash loans. And I think the possibilities there are endless, which are super interesting, but also there's a lot of risk management that needs to be done.
Yeah, I think, DeFi applications are just applications, and that's kind of, the thing with this stack is that they look and feel the same, and except the DeFi applications a lot of times are just holding so much more money. So it's easy to think that it's something that you can just deploy on a software developer kind of life cycle cadence, when in fact these things do need to go through a different developer life cycle. And to Demi's point, there's complex interactions between these systems. So I think one of the most important things that people need to think about is what dependencies, are they taking on, and if there's transitive dependencies, then all of those risks compound, and that's the benefit and the risk of these composable systems is that they become much more complex. And so, I think knowing exactly what dependencies you're taking on and vetting those dependencies very carefully is really important. And the lower down the stack you are, the more important it is that you're building a solid foundation for other people to build on. That's why you're seeing, ETH2 is taking such a long time to build and ship, for a lot of reasons, but like that's a foundation, right? The Ethereum blockchain that all of these apps are built on top, and any deficiencies at that layer cascade up. Similarly, any dependencies on price feeds, oracles, other contracts that you're interacting with, how you actually process the data and display it to users, all of that needs to be looked at with a fine-tooth comb when you're building these financial applications.
Okay, yeah, that's really great. So regarding risk, like you can kind of think of it as like centralization risk, security, and economic, and also layer one risk. Are there other like levels of risk that people, or categories of risk that people should think about?
I mean, we just kind of touched on it, but I think that the most intriguing thing about these new systems is the composability factor. And what's even more fascinating is the fact that you can exist and you can be safe and you can be secure, and then someone else can come along and either relying on your system or interacting with your system or combining your system with their system to create another system. Somehow like the whole thing breaks down, right? And we've seen this happen a couple times already. And that I think is like, I think it's a foreign concept for a lot of people, right? Like if you secure your system, you should be okay. But in this new world where everything is interacting, it may not be. And the number of combinations there are, right? The number of sort of ways different things can interact. And when you throw users in there and you throw like upgradable smart contracts in there and you on and on, UIs, like there's just so much, right? And so, I mean, I've taken the approach of not touching smart contracts until we get further along building new networks. But if you are, I think that the best thing you can do is assume that everything is going to explode and let people through little tunnels and see what happens and go from there, rather than like defaulting to like a completely open state where everything's possible and then constricting it and rewriting it and refactoring things as they break down.
Cool. All right. So how important is it for a DeFi project to think about decentralization early on? Specifically, like, should they have a centralized emergency stop button? Should they have any particular circuit breakers implemented? And like, regarding circuit breakers, like what are things that exist in the traditional finance space that we can potentially like apply to DeFi to make it safer early on?
Yeah, this has been a hot button issue. And I think, a lot of people might have justify different opinions on this. So I'll just speak for myself. Is I think if you're handling people's money, security is really, really important, right? It's really hard to justify, oops, I lost your life savings, or right, like so that really kind of has to be number one. And unfortunately, this technology is so new that we're still discovering new types of mistakes and new attack vectors and things. So I think if we want to protect people's money, for me, I actually fully understand having these kill switches in the early days. I think there's different levels of features that people can build into those that can, it makes the security kind of on a gradient, right? So for example, having it just be a pause, but maybe not allowing you to update it to arbitrary code, or having certain parameters that are changeable, but limiting what that core team can do. And I think depending on the complexity of the protocol and how early you are, it could make sense to be somewhere different on that spectrum. So for me personally, I'm pretty comfortable with that, but I think that needs to be revised and updated depending on how much funds is under the team's custody. That's a really important factor, and how much of a dependency you are in the ecosystem. So if a lot of other projects start depending on you, the requirements on making sure that you are in fact decentralizing and reducing your point of failure becomes that much more important, because again, it's that cascading nature of risk in the whole system. And I think that when teams do that, so I kind of said at the beginning that we made that choice to do the progressive decentralization thing for the graph. I think it's really important to really be and like commit to a mission alignment, right, on decentralization. And I think that there's a lot that goes into that. I mean, it starts with values, and I think that different people value decentralization differently. And it's tough because it's the kind of thing that really pays off in the long term. In the short term, decentralization doesn't matter, right? If you just look on the space of a day or 2 days, 3 days, right? The reason that it's so important is because it allows us to build more and more complex systems on top of a solid foundation. And so if you kind of trick people into saying, oh yeah, we're building a decentralized system, but it's not decentralized, and then a bunch of people start building on you, and then you're like, haha, that's a really big problem. And so I think it starts with having really strong values and committing to those values. And then I think that needs to be backed up with action. So how you engage the community, and how you evolve over time and actually prioritize decentralization. And I think that there's a lot of things that teams can do to demonstrate that. And at the end of the day, you can really see it in the incentives. So I think this is something that you see a lot, where maybe people will pay lip service to decentralization, but then they build a business model that maybe like requires them to lock users in and do this and that. And you can use whatever words you want, but clearly the incentives are misaligned. And so I think people need to back it up with action and system design. And if you do that in a way where you can decentralize over time, and you've structured things so that you're not prevented from doing that, then I think that's an acceptable path.
Yeah, I think Yaniv's answer is on point. I fully agree with that. The whole point of DeFi is that you don't need to trust others with your funds and transactions, but also bootstrapping a decentralized system from day one is hard. So you can find good solutions that achieve the same outcome without full decentralizations. One example is introducing upgradable smart contracts with the right governance structures. Also, an example is after we conducted an audit for Compound, they introduced a time lock so that any decision that was made by the Compound team had a period of time before being implemented. So people could decide whether they wanted to move their funds out if they didn't agree with that decision. And then beyond circuit breakers, I think there are another set of things that projects can do related to penetration and stress testing, responsible disclosure of known vulnerabilities, anomaly detection systems, and also implementing security and risk management frameworks. In the end, it's all about managing risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to point out that the end goal is decentralization. However, you will never get there if you launch your system and then it's immediately hacked and you have no way to recover, to press pause, to migrate to a new system. That's not going to lead to success either. And so we kind of have to find this balance between like being very, very short term and very, very long term. And I think that if you have the long-term goals laid out, you want to be decentralized, and this is the path that we're on, and you share that with the world, that brings in a level of accountability to you. It brings in a level of accountability with the team and the employees. And one of the reasons that we want things to be decentralized is the accountability factor, the transparency factor, the trustless factor, et cetera. And so I think that if you adhere to the core values of decentralization, even if you're not currently decentralized and you're open and you're transparent, I think it's Status that has this thing called the wall of shame, which I absolutely adore, because they literally have this page that says all the things that they're ashamed that they're doing today, that they want to fix and they intend to fix moving forward. And there are things that like you have to do them now, because otherwise you would just sit in a box by yourself and build for years. And then at some point you'd be like, oh, hey, my product's ready, and realize that nobody wants it, right? And so it's all about finding the balance, the long term and the short term, decentralized, centralized, et cetera. And I also just want to point out that today, the biggest issue that we're seeing is that these systems are they're launching too soon, they're insecure, and unexpected things happen. Now, in the future, if that shifts, and the biggest things that we're seeing are scams and exit scams and admin takeovers and things like that, obviously, we'll need to adjust that information. But right now, I would be super happy, super happy if, every DeFi protocol that got hacked, we could press the pause button. That would make me happy.
Yeah, we've really seen, I think mistakes on both sides of that spectrum. And, on the security side, obviously projects launching really before that they had any business launching. And I think it's part of, that, bar that we have to hold ourselves to in this space that starts at the very beginning, right? It starts way before the audit in just your engineering culture and, making sure that you're not rushing your engineers, they're building really important systems, and you can't be like deadline driven, right? You have to, let them do their work properly, write tests as you go. You can't be adding tests at the end or skipping tests and doing the audits. Like all of that is just table stakes. But then you also have, mistakes, I think, on the other side of teams that have taken 2-3 years to ship, and then they've launched and nobody's wanted to use the products. So we've seen some interesting things kind of in the middle. So I thought, FutureSwap did a really great job. They launched early. They kept their system running. I forget if it was 3 days or a week, something like that, just a few days. It had 3 days, had a crazy amount of volume in that time. And then they said, okay, that was a test. Clearly people want this. Pause. And now let us go off and make sure that we've designed everything really, really thoroughly to be able to handle this amount of traffic and usage. And I think like that was a really interesting middle ground. And I think people should explore those styles of middle grounds to make sure that you're both building something people want, but also launching something that's secure.
Yeah, I want to just double down on FutureSwap's approach. I've worked with them advised them, I guess, been involved with them since the beginning. And I don't think it was just me, but I do think that I instilled the fear of God in them in some ways, right? And I think it's good to be scared, right? When they saw that exponential growth, and they realized that these were real people, real people using their products and something bad could happen, they felt that. And I think that is something that some of these products don't realize for some reason. You should be scared, right? If you're handling other people's money, if people are using your product and they're, even if it's 100% decentralized, they're still trusting you, right? In some way. And that's something that you kind of have to carry with you. And FutureSwap did an amazing job, just an amazing job at sort of like, okay, and we're done. Because they're clearly not. Like, you needed the information, but if that exponential growth had kept climbing, it could have been disastrous, you know? And so that case study, I don't know, someone tell Derek to write the whole thing up, please.
Yeah, just to add to that, we've worked with the FutureSwap team. We audited version 1 of their protocol.
Cool. So I know you guys touched on this really lightly, but do you have any tips for people on how to actually build a security-focused culture internally? Like different things, different processes that engineering teams can implement?
Scare them all the time.
Yeah, I mean,
in our case, sorry, go ahead, Yaniv.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think a lot of it has to come from the top and has to be part of the culture from day one. And, you know, you actually have the same thing in traditional engineering where you have to make hard business trade-offs, right? You've got scope, quality, and schedule, right? Those are the three kind of constraints, and you can only really choose at most two. So, you know, I think a lot of times I'll have like a business manager who wants to get the thing out and they want all of the bells and whistles. And so they push and then they sacrifice on quality. And in this case, quality really means security. And so I think you kind of have to make some difficult decisions around scope. You know, unfortunately, a lot of teams, you know, have fixed resources. You know, you can't work for 2 years straight before you ship something. And so a lot of times schedule is dictated by, you know, how much funding you have. And so really the one that you have that's in your control is scope. And that means making difficult decisions around cutting features, limiting what you're doing. And I think that's really the knob that you need to turn to say, you know, we accept that maybe these are things we're going to add later. That's not going to be part of the V1. Make sure that you still have a sound economic design that still functions without those additional features. And I think that's the main thing that you know, founders and management teams can do, you know, early on.
Yeah, in our case, given that we are a security company, we put a lot of focus on our research culture. So, you know, in addition to implementing standard best practices for security, our researchers have a deep personal interest in exploring new approaches to security. So we give them plenty of time for them to dive into this research, and then we come up with insights, and we share those insights with the community. So it's our way also to contribute back to the industry and make sure that, you know, in the end, our mission is to protect the open economy. So anything that we can do to accelerate that, you know, we do.
Yeah. So one little thing that I think I've been mildly successful at with my own team is I hire and then I continue to encourage like a very questioning atmosphere within the company. We're a remote team. We've always been a remote team. So we have all hands calls, which are everyone, you know, all the different departments. And they often go far over the 1 hour time because we'll just get into the weeds on something. And I want to hear what people have to say. And what this does is it empowers my team to be aware of everything that's happening and to also bring their own personal values to the table. And so when someone says, right, but if we do that, you know, is that really aligned with our values? Do we want to go down that path? Like, I don't fire them or insult them. If someone brings something up that, you know, I may disagree with, or, you know, in a normal office environment, you would be scared to bring up to your boss. Like I love to hear them out, and then I love to challenge their thinking, and I love to challenge my own thinking. And what this does is that it sort of, my team has never been like complicit. They do not just like do their job and like go on their merry way, which, you know, at times can be quite frustrating when it comes to like getting things done, right? If we have to have a discussion about literally every single thing and bring our culture and our values within it. but it is so worth it in the end because we are truly like all building this thing together. And you know, when I'm busy or if I'm like my mind's in a different place, I know that my entire team has like the same passion and the same fear and the same everything for the things that I care about and for other things that I may not care as deeply about. And I think that that is incredibly important. If you dismiss your employees' opinions, if you kind of shut down conversations, if you get your ego bruised, you're never going to have an environment that creates that magic.
And I just wanted to add one more tip here, if I can. You know, people will throw terms around like formal verification or simulation and economic modeling, which I think are really great. And if you can do that, that's awesome. Do it. You know, it'll make your project better. But a lot of the security stuff is really actually just down to basics engineering stuff. And I think it starts with having a really clear protocol or system design and specification. And if it's not specified, then the behavior is undefined. And I think it's really important to be specifying at a high level of detail, every piece of the protocol. And then when you translate that into code, so much of the kind of hacks and things that happen can be mitigated by really clear documentation and really comprehensive tests. And you do that as you go, and you build that into your culture that you do not merge a PR until it's been reviewed, right? Code reviews. I wonder how many teams are like code reviewing every single PR and making sure that everything is documented with tests. And if you just have that built in from day one, just those processes will get you really far.
Yeah, dude, code reviews. So this is what I mean by having a team that all cares about the same thing, because there will be weeks where I'm like, dude, just someone freaking merge the thing. But someone else will be like, no, right? And then a few months later, it'll flip. And that's what culture is, right? We all know that we should be 2 reviews, every single one, double check, verified, green check mark, blah, 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 right? But we also know that you can go in and you can override the merge settings, right? But we don't. Even if, we're in a rush, or even if something is happening, or even if my mind is elsewhere and I really do just want that copy update merge. And it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, that's great. So pertaining to what the industry needs to do holistically in order to create better security standards, what are some thoughts that you guys have? We have 2 minutes.
All right, I'll
on our side, I think security is not just conducting an audit, but it's a mindset, and it starts from building systems, as Yanni was mentioning, also then inspecting the systems through different methodologies and audits, and also then monitoring and assessing risk and having mechanisms to mitigate that risk. So in particular, adding to what Yaniv said, we see a lot of reliance in automated tooling and other things. And in the end, I'm not saying they're not useful, but you cannot cut corners in security. And in particular, I don't think it's so much about. Okay, we have a soundtrack here.
All right, I'm just going to say, question everything. If you're a user, question the products you use. If you're a builder, question the decisions that you make. If you're Ryan, question what caused your life to get to this point. Is this your farm, by the way, your farmhouse?
Coming in hot, Taylor. Wow.
Wow. I love the decor. I do. Okay, question everything. It'll get you so far.
That's a rental. So good call. This is not quite our humble abode, but good OPSEC. Vicious. That's why we love you.